Thank you. Hello, this is August 12th, 2026. I'm Town Moderator Adam Dash. I want to start tonight's committee applicant interviews with a short explanation and introduction. First, I want to thank all the applicants for stepping up and offering to help the town. Belmont cannot operate without volunteers. I think you'll find public service to be a rewarding and interesting experience. The interview process will be that I will name a candidate, then promote them to panelist, and then interview that candidate one-on-one. I ask that each candidate turn on their camera during the interview. Don't worry, I'm not going to take your background or fashion sense into account when making the appointments. It'll just be me asking questions of each candidate individually. For candidates who applied for more than one committee, I may ask additional questions designed for each of those committees, depending on how the answers go. Each committee candidate will be asked the same questions as every other candidate for that committee. This is done to make everything fair. The questions were developed by me with the help of the Moderator Advisory Council, and I want to thank the council for their help. The order of the interviews tonight is planned to be as follows. Chris Doyle for the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee, Aaron Picklingus for the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee, Pat Bruch for the Permanent Building Advisory Committee, John Parala, who applied for both Permanent Building Advisory Committee and Bylaw Review Committee, James Knight for the Warrant Committee, and Mark Carthy for the Warrant Committee. Please be ready to go when I call on you. I expect each interview to be in the 15 to 20-minute range. That, of course, depends upon you. And I ask that answers be limited to 3 minutes for each question. The interviews are taking place on August 10th, which we had on Monday, 12th, which is tonight, and then on 17th, which is next Monday, with one additional person being interviewed before the start of the next Moderator Advisory Council meeting on August 19th due to a scheduling conflict. I will then not take any action on the appointments until after August 26th to allow the public to send me their comments about the candidates. You may also email comments to me at moderator@belmont-ma.gov. That email address is also on the town moderator page of the town's website. I will then make the appointments by August 31st and explain who is appointed and why. This meeting is being live broadcast and recorded. The recording will be posted online on the Belmont Media Center and on the Town of Belmont websites for future viewing. The recording of the meeting on August 10th is currently posted for viewing right now. That said, applicants should just relax, be themselves, and answer the questions as best as they can. This is not a public hearing, and there will be no public comment taken tonight. This will just be between the applicants and the moderator, but those of you who are watching, I welcome you. So now, without further ado, let's begin the interviews. So, first up, of the people who are here, we have Chris Doyle. So, Chris, I'm going to promote you to panelist. Good evening, Chris.
Hi, Adam.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, I'm going to ask you some questions here. Can you please provide some background on your education, work, and volunteer experience, including which you believe would help the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee, including financial skills that you have?
Okay. In terms of my background and skills, I have had a long paid career working for a consulting firm that works with clients in the public and large nonprofit sectors. So my clients in that job over 25 years were cities, counties, state agencies, and then health systems and higher education organizations working on financial planning, debt, and investments for those clients. And so in the course of that time, I worked with a wide variety of clients, including some municipalities and so on. And that gave me a strong background in capital planning, debt finance, and related areas. And I find that in my volunteer life, the part of it related to the town, first on the warrant committee for 6 years, and now on capital, that I do bring that experience comes in handy and is very relevant to my work on this committee. In terms of skills, I would say I am a combination of an analytical person as well as someone oriented toward communication and consensus building. So I try to use my analytical skills to um, inform conversations and to bring people into conversations in a consensus building with a consensus building orientation. So those I'd say are my kind of skills that I try to deploy as part of the capital committee. In terms of my education, I have an undergraduate degree in political science and economics, and then a joint graduate degree in from business school and from a public affairs school. And I can elaborate if that's interesting. So.
Thank you. Do you have any changes that you would like to see in how the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee operates when a capital project is proposed?
Hmm. I would say I've been on the committee for 4 years. And I think the thing that I feel like we've made a lot of progress on, and we still have progress left to some improvements and some progress that can be made, is on trying to take both a long-term view and a short-term, combined with a short-term view. So the long-term view is really important because we've tried to have the town and town meeting think about how we can basically save for very expensive projects. And so that we're just using debt in a very judicious manner and try to avoid debt when we can by saving per large projects over years. There's a limit to that. But I'd say that's one of our themes that we've tried to deploy in the committee since the bylaw was passed that created this committee 4 or 5 years ago. In terms of a certain project coming up, I think that projects are proposed through the department heads and then they are then reviewed with our committee. It's different from the CPA, right? I think we all know that where, either a resident or the town or a group can bring a specific project. The capital committee deals with town projects that include schools, obviously. And so they come up through the town. So I think the main thing I've sort of learned and what has worked well is to really be communicating with the town as early as possible. That's imperative. And so that's something that I look forward to keep doing that with the town, where we're brought in early in a way that still allows the town to do its review. I will say that upon occasion, there are sometimes projects that our committee doesn't have jurisdiction on, but that might come to the select board. But part of why we're the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee is that even if town meeting is not the body that is necessarily allocating funds for a certain project, we want our capital plan to be comprehensive and to include all funding sources. And so I've been working with the town to make sure that even if our committee isn't bringing something to town meeting, that we're still well aware of projects so we can build them into the multi-year plan and be able to deploy the town's resources for capital most effectively. So that's a little bit of a long answer, but yeah.
So what do you see as the town's biggest capital challenges, and how can the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee help address them?
I think that we have a few challenges. At a basic level, we have a lot of needs and not enough resources. That's a little bit of stating the obvious, but in some ways, that's not that interesting. It's sort of how do we deal with that imbalance or that fact. And I think that one thing is for us to keep trying to coordinate closely with other entities in town that have an impact on capital. So that would be communicating early and even more often than we already do with the CPA committee, so that we're while the CPA group needs to abide by those separate state laws, we want to have those projects benefit the town at large and be coordinated on those. Also, the light board is another example of where we have to coordinate. They control property at the prior landfill transfer station. And that is a very large potential project in terms of the possibility of the DPW going over there. So it's very important for us to coordinate and communicate early with them so that we understand what their thinking is and the town can plan early for that important project. So I think I wouldn't say that those are problems. It's more that those are important things that I think can enhance our capital planning. Those are just two examples. There are other things as well, but those are two examples, I would say.
Thanks. How would you describe your method of working, communicating, and dealing with conflicts in a group or committee setting?
Hmm. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, I have always worked in both in my paid and unpaid life to try to use analysis and thoughtful evaluation of things to inform conversations. So that's true here too. So trying to use analysis to demonstrate to people all the different sides of an issue. Um, that I think helps. The other thing I think that helps, especially in the context of capital, where there's a lot of times there are trade-offs and we're making trade-offs potentially over time. It's trying to have people understand. And now that we have this multi-year, this long view, 30 years process, having people understand where a project might be able to get slotted in. And I think when people are when they have a bigger understand of a longer term picture and understand where a project might get slotted in, it helps to have people feel more comfortable and have better assurance. So basically, I sort of try to bring a planning and an analytical view to have a conversation that might result in conflict, try to draw it back to, kind of the facts and the trade-offs that can come about. I mean, the other thing is just sort of simple human things that it's basically almost never useful to yell or use inappropriate or unprofessional language. And a lot of things can be accomplished by just being courteous and respectful.
How do you think the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee can best communicate with and advise the town in the short and the long term?
I mean, our charge under the bylaw is to advise town meeting. And so we take that seriously. That's our, our front and center, most immediate responsibility. I think because we're taking this comprehensive view under the bylaw, I think we can keep working with the town and the entities in town. I mentioned a couple, but there are others. The library has like its own specific, legal standing. So I think in all of these cases, it's incumbent on our committee to communicate with all the elements of town, even if it's a kind of an adjunct entity like the light board or has a different governance like, the school committee or the library committee, to try to bring their needs to bear, and to have, really at the end of the day, our goal is to try and deploy taxpayer dollars in the way that's the most, I'll use the word effective. I mean, it might be also efficient, but really the most effective to accomplish town goals. So.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think our committee, we've made a lot of progress in the implementation of the bylaw from 4 or 5 years ago. We have an ambitious agenda as far as additional things that we want to accomplish. I mentioned some of the coordination things. There's some other things I put in my application related to trying to consider building in and looking for funding sources that might be relevant to certain kinds of projects, external funding sources that might be relevant to certain types of projects. There's going to be a potentially a new enterprise fund that'll have some capital element. So we have a lot of things we want to work on, and I think I'm looking forward to having our group. We have good teamwork in our group currently, and we welcome whoever is appointed to the committee to have people continue to build on that teamwork and work on some of the several things that we want to get accomplished to really bring kind of the bylaw to its most fruition. I regard us to sort of half or 2/3 of the way along that process. So
That's great. No, I appreciate you coming tonight, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you
Have a good
for
evening.
uh, thank you for joining. Appreciate
Okay,
it.
bye-bye.
Okay. Next up, I wanted to see Aaron Piklingus. I don't know if Aaron's here. Some people's names on the attendee list aren't necessarily full. Aaron, if you're here, if you could raise your Zoom hand. If not, we will bump you down the list to move on to the next person. Okay. Well, next up, while we're waiting for Aaron, would be Pat Bruce. I'm going to promote you to panelist now. You're muted. Oh, there you are. Good evening, Pat.
Good evening.
So Pat Bruce is an applicant for a permanent building advisory committee. So good evening. Thank you for coming. So if you could please provide some background on your education, work, and volunteer experience, which you believe would help the permanent building advisory committee, including financial, construction, and management skills you have.
Okay, well, for starters, my education, I actually have a bachelor's degree in nursing. That doesn't quite translate to building projects, but I will say I'm an excellent observer. As a nurse, one has to be able to observe changes in patients and those kinds of things. And actually, that skill has served me well in working on building projects over the past 20 or so years. So that's that. Volunteer. Um, I've been a volunteer in Belmont almost since we moved here. I've been living here 48 years, and I've volunteered in various capacities. Uh, as a young mom, I was the vice president of the Winbrook PTA, and the moderator appointed the vice presidents of the Winbrook and Burbank PTAs to the building committee for that project. It was a joint project. And that was how he decided to decide who should be the user for the representative on the committee. And it turned out to be something that I really, really enjoyed. And it was a very tough project. It was a difficult project for the town and for the committee, but I turned out to have some pretty good skill sets for that particular job. And so that's what I've pretty much been doing. I've also served on the warrant committee for a long time. As the warrant committee, I also was the warrant committee representative to the capital budget committee. And then a few years ago, when the capital budget committee was reconfigured, I was and still am, a moderator appointee to the comprehensive capital budget committee, which kind of keeps me going in there. And I think there was a third part of that question.
There was financial construction management skills, volunteer experience, work, and education.
Yeah, okay, financial construction experience. Well, I've been working on building projects since 1986 for the town of Belmont, all municipal projects. And I've also been on the warrant committee, so I've helped with debt exclusions, overrides, all of those things. So getting the funding from the town, but also the other side of it, keeping the budget going. That's one of the most important jobs of a building committee, and the permanent building committee tries to impress that on the building committees that are appointed by the moderator, that the budget is one of the most important things they're doing. They establish the budget, but then it's their job to stick to it.
What makes you want to serve and continue to serve on the permanent building advisory committee?
I would like to finish a project that we began many years ago, which was to create what I called a primer. I think a manual might be a better word, of the various steps in the public process and what building committees really need to do. So we had done this, I don't even remember, 10, 15 years ago. And as it turns out, that material is basically lost. It was not saved in computer or something. I'm not exactly sure what the story is, but it was a very comprehensive project that we did over a number of years, and it was useful and helpful. So we're in the process now of trying to create something that will be more helpful today, because there's lots of things that have changed in the law. Oh, yes, I also took the state MCPPO course, which is a public purchasing and laws and that kind of thing course that you take. And I've taken that a couple of times. I'm not current now, but I was for a long number of years. So I learned all about the state process and the state laws and all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of things that people don't understand that are different about the municipalities and how they have to deal with construction projects than what we do in our kitchens. And it's sometimes really hard to explain to a person who hasn't dealt with it before that, no, you can't just change your mind in the middle of it and say, how about if we do this and not that? You can do that, but it's going to cost a lot of money. And that isn't the way it works with your kitchen. You know, you can kind of barter with your contractor, but you can't do that in a public bid process. So it's a very different kind of thing. So that's one of the things. We're an advisory committee. So unless there is a project that doesn't have a building committee, we don't actually do the building committee day-to-day work. We advise them and we serve on building committees, but not all of us at the same time. And so that's how we advise, by serving on the committee.
And so what do you see as the town's biggest challenge, construction challenges, and how can the permanent building advisory committee help address them?
I think that we should begin to revisit what we did about 25 years ago. So about 25 years ago, with the Board of Selectmen, we initiated a process where we looked comprehensively at all the buildings in town and made a broad outline, very broad outline of what projects should be done and in what order. And this was actually driven by a lawsuit that was against the town by the Disability Access Committee, actually the state committee. So the town was under a court order to make the buildings accessible. And there was no way to make 14 or 15 buildings accessible all at once. And there needed to be a process. And so we met with the Warrant Committee, Capital Budget Committee, Board of Selectmen, and the Permanent Building Committee every couple of weeks to every month for 2 or 3 years. We came up with a list that was 14 projects long. And the important thing about the list was more the order and the reasons for the order than it was the date that we thought it could happen. We were way too ambitious. We really thought we would finish this in 10 to 15 years, and we have not yet finished. We still have the DPW left to go. As you know, there was a Band-Aid procedure done about 5 years ago for that. And so the full renovation and replacement of the DPW is still pending, but all of the other projects are completed. Not all in the same order that we maybe thought in 2020 was a good idea. It didn't matter. As times change, things change. So what I think we need to do now is the town has put the town in a position that we don't have to create new buildings for every single project. Maintenance is critical. Maintenance was not critical in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It just wasn't what the town was all about. And so now maintenance is critical. How you go about doing something, the work the Capital Budget Committee has done with the Chenery, phasing that project in. There were 3 major things that had to be coordinated. It was done. So you're not going to see a request to replace the Chenery. You know, it's that kind of thing. So it's probably time to sit down, look at the buildings, work with the department heads. This is the Warrant Committee, the Capital Budget Committee, the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator, all of these people working with these people to come up with a game plan for the next 20 or 40 years.
How would you describe your methods of working, communicating, and dealing with conflicts in a group or committee setting?
In terms of communicating, I try to be very open about what is being done and why. I believe more information is better rather than less. Um, I don't mind more meetings rather than fewer. I like things done at meetings. Those are the kinds of things I like. I like to work with a group of people. I like to hear new ideas. We get a lot of new ideas. We get wonderful new ideas from people on building committees, but we also get good ideas from citizens. And most of the projects that we do have a large number of public hearings. Those are good. They're important for the community and they're important for us, and they're really important for the contractor, the architect, and the project manager to hear how the townspeople are feeling about something.
How do you think the Permanent Building Advisory Committee can best communicate with and advise the town in the short and long term?
Perhaps by having more or establish a process where there are meetings where we actually sit with the Board of Selectmen and perhaps the warrant committee and go over what the long-term goals are or what the for the town, not for the permanent building committee, we're advisory, but how some of them might be accomplished. Sometimes things get derailed because there are emergencies in town, there's other things that are happening, there's an override for operating budget that's needed. All of these things we have to be understanding and working out, but we also the town needs to be aware that we can't allow the buildings to not be maintained or upgraded when it's needed. So I think we've been doing a good job at that. Everybody's trying to do things like the turf at the high school is replaced on a fairly regular basis now. Um, that was a brand new thing for the town, to provide turf, and then to get that, you had to re-provide it in 10 years, 10 to 15. And when we do tend to push it out to the 15, but it has to be done. And if it isn't done, you've got a much bigger problem. So those are the kinds of things that we have been alerting the town to, and we probably can do a better job of that.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, Pat, while we're talking?
I don't think so.
That'd be great. Well, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it.
Okay.
So next up, we're going to be talking to John Parala, who has applied for Permanent Building Advisory Committee and the Bylaw Review Committee. I will promote John. John, you have to unmute yourself and turn your camera on. Are you there? Ah, there we go. Can you hear me? I don't think we can hear you. We can see you. Is your volume up? Sometimes you need to log off, log back on. Sometimes that fixes it. So maybe if you did that, that would help. So I assume that's what's going on. All right. While he does that, we will move on and we'll come back to him. We're going to go talk to James Knight, who has applied for the warrant committee. James.
Hello.
Hey, all right. We're cooking now. Good to see you. So thank you for coming. So James
Yes,
Knight
thank
has
you.
applied to be on the warrant committee. So James, can you please provide some background on your education, work, and volunteer experience, which you believe would help the warrant committee, including financial skills that you have?
Yes. So I guess start with my background. I grew up in Belmont, and I moved away for a while, moved back in 2011, and have lived here since. And I, as a profession, I am a software engineer, which does not have direct finance relevance. However, I think a lot of the I don't know a lot of the skills that I use day to day are very relevant to what the warrant committee needs to do. You know, it's a lot of sort of close analysis, understanding of difficult problems, and communication. And that is what I do all day. I work I work both with members of my company as well as members of the wider world, because I work on projects which are open source, and that requires a lot of collaboration. And not everyone's even working towards the same goals, right? And so we all have to get along and come up with plans, good reasoning, why some particular outcome should be adopted. So that's kind of my day to day. I've been on a town meeting since 2022, and I feel like about now, I finally feel comfortable with that. It's been after a few years, and so I want to increase my involvement in town activities. I enjoy being on town meeting. I like I like being able to help out there and provide input when it's valuable. And I think I can I can bring my ability to give useful input to the warrant committee as well. I also do serve on the board of directors for a small flour mill. And so I have
L-O-U-R?
yes.
Just
So I have to read and advise on their annual budgets and income and loss statements and all that. I've done that for 2 years now. So there's that. Yeah, I think that's about it.
So what do you see as the town's biggest fiscal challenges, and how can the warrant committee help address them?
Yeah, so the biggest fiscal challenge for Belmont is pretty clear, which is like 80% of our income comes from property tax receipts, and those are set by law to grow at 2.5% plus new development, and costs grow more than that every year. And there's a real problem, which is I don't think that residents understand this by and large, that our fiscal problems are kind of built in. That unless we can diversify our revenue, which has been a consistent refrain from all levels of government for a few years now, which is great, but it's going to be a long slog to do that. Unless we can do that, we are going to have to keep coming back to the residents for overrides, and that's really hard. It is not popular to say, hey, can we raise your taxes more? And so it's a choice between do you reduce services, which is not popular, or do you come for overrides, which is not popular? And having to explain that to the residents of the town, why we're doing that. I just had a conversation the other day with somebody. I was saying, oh, we probably are going to need to pass an override in the future, and they were complaining to me about the streets. Popular thing to complain about. And they said, oh, is Belmont, probably because Belmont's built all of these new buildings. That's why we don't have enough money. And that's kind of understandable thing to say if you don't understand the details of how the financials actually work, because those were debt exclusions, right? Those don't actually come out of the same bucket of money as the operating budget. And so that really has no impact on it. But sort of intuitively, you might expect that spending money on a new high school means you have less money to spend on the streets. And so I don't know, I guess that's just a difficult problem.
Yeah. How would you describe your methods of working and communicating in a group or committee setting?
Yeah. So I like to talk to people. I like to listen to people. And I think um, one of the most important things is to not to be open to other people's ideas. You might have your own notion coming into something, what you think is right, but it's really important to give other people space to talk, and to express their ideas, and to really honestly give it a good consideration. And I think that sort of like the communication, there are many problems that can be solved with communication. And not all of them, obviously. If you don't have enough money, you don't have enough money, right? But there are many problems that can be solved by communication and listening. So it's important to come to a sort of educated decision. And part of an educated decision is making sure that everybody can bring their own information to the table in a reasonable way.
Thank you. How would you go about making unpopular decisions and dealing with conflicts?
Yeah. So the most important thing about making a, let's say, controversial decision is that you can explain it, right? Even if you disagree with somebody, if you can get them to understand why you believe the way that you do, and even if you don't get them to agree with you in the end, if you can get them to understand why it is that you think, that your decision is the right way to go, then that is really useful. And so I think that that's kind of the most important thing about making a unpopular or controversial decision, is to have a really well expressed rationale, even accepting that it may not convince everybody. It can at least let them know that you thought hard about the problem, that you used appropriate evidence, and that it's not just some arbitrary decision. And when you can do that, it will help people to trust you, and maybe in future discussions, because we're not talking about like one and done, right? This is going to be an ongoing discussions over many topics. In future discussions, they'll still trust that you are trying to do what is best, even if that in that one particular case, maybe you were came to a opposite conclusion.
How do you think the warrant committee can best communicate with and advise the town in the long and the short term?
Yeah, so that's a really hard question, because most people don't want to spend the time to like the warrant committee writes a report, right, on the budget every year. It's 40 something pages. And most people aren't going to read that. They don't want to read that. Like it's not interesting. And so even town meeting members don't all read that. I don't know what that, might be interesting to do a survey to find out how many of the town meeting members read it. But like, I don't know how you can best inform the public at large on these subjects. I think there's a lot more of a chance of being able to inform town meeting effectively. And I think that some of the things that are done are currently very effective. The briefing, the warrant briefing that happens today, I think that not today. I mean, that happens. Is a very good method of communication that happens before town meeting. Like I feel like that does a very good job of sort of educating people before it becomes actual town meeting debate. I think the warrant committee report, while it may not be directly read by everybody, is a very good document to have as a backstop for answers when you can say, as it says in the warrant committee report on page 3, XYZ, as the answer to a question, right? That is, I think, very effective way to sort of stop a maybe spiraling discussion at town meeting. I don't know. It's hard to get people's attention, I think, is the core of the problem here.
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
No. I was gonna say, is there anything else you wanted to add while we're chatting?
I don't know. I guess I think I feel like I would be a good candidate for this. I'm sure I hear there's 12 other candidates for warrant committee, so I'm sure that many of them are good candidates as well. And if I don't get appointed to warrant committee, I think I would love to figure out some other way to contribute to the town. So keep in touch, I guess.
Well, we're still going through the process, so
Yep.
We'll play out, but I very much appreciate you coming tonight. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our original order. We're going to have Aaron Picklingus, who is a candidate for the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee. And after Aaron, we will go to John Perala and then to Mark Carthy.
Hello, good evening. And my apologies for the mix-up on the time. That's wholly on me.
No, I understand how family demands are. So.
Well, it's more just that I have the CCBC meets at 7:30 in the morning, and my brain didn't shift into that gear. So
no problem. Glad to see you. So could you provide some background on your education, work, and volunteer experience, which you believe would help the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee, including financial skills you may have?
Okay. Well, I've been serving on the Capital Budget Committee as a volunteer since its inception. Actually, I don't remember what year that was. 4 years ago? Maybe 4 or 5? So I was on the sort of inaugural team of the CCBC as it got formed, as we started sort of thinking about how to execute on the new charge that differentiated it from the old Capital Budget Committee, which is to focus more on a longer term view. And so I worked with Jennifer Hewitt and Chris Doyle, along with other members of that committee, to figure out how we would sort of evaluate projects and work to sort of identify a more systematic way of prioritizing things. So we used a similar process that I used when I served on the Structural Change Impact Group for 18 months, 15 months, years leading up to that, to do the same thing where we solicited the town for hundreds of ideas to improve the sort of condition and financial condition and service condition in the town, and developed a rubric to evaluate them. So we created sort of a similar rubric to do for the Capital Budget Committee, working with, I guess, trying to think it was a former member who made it, and I'm sorry, her name is escaping me right now, Melinda. And so she created an Excel form that we use for that. So I contribute to that. But I'm a big fan of like coming up with a process. So that's what I did. My educational background, just to answer the question you asked, is in social psychology, which is the tool that I found to be helpful in everything that I do. I spent about 10 years as a research software developer at Boston Children's Hospital, developing tools to help people identify social needs, and built an entire database of agencies that do things that relate to what they might need so we can connect them together. Trying to think of what might be helpful. I worked as an innovation sprint design lead for a pharmaceutical company, developing ideas to solve problems specifically for the unmet needs of people living with HIV in the United States. So that's sort of a broader sort of consulting type of role. We evaluated different ideas that came to us and different data and sort of absorbed a lot of information and tried to make useful tools out of it. I worked as an innovation specialist at Brigham and Women's Hospital for a few years, sort of in a similar role, an internal consultant, helping people evaluate ideas they had to use technology to improve care, identifying opportunities to connect with other organizations and people who might be able to support those things with spinouts or different collaborations. And I think those things are helpful in town when we think about how do we broaden our view a little bit to go beyond just sort of thinking like, what is the specific capital need? And I think that's reflected in the rubric we use, which looks at like health and safety. It looks at like freeing up a capital asset that might be blocked by some sort of lack of investment that maybe has gone on for a while. And the other measures that we have in there, thinking about like, does it align with a town priority? So just thinking about things in that kind of way systematically and trying to develop a process that's repeatable and that gets applied to all different things. So it's not just, do I like this project? It's like, do I believe this project aligns with these things that we as a committee and as a town have agreed on? And actually, I'm really looking forward to seeing more of the updated comprehensive plan. I did serve on the VIC and tried to get the comprehensive plan updated a bunch of times, working with Kevin Doran when he was the chair to get funding from MAPC that got repurposed for I think the housing production plan instead. And the pandemic happened while we were trying to do that, which slowed us down. But again, it's like thinking about these broader pictures and how do we identify what is actually a town priority as opposed to like my opinion. So I said, that's a very long answer. I teach kids how to ride bikes. That's what I do now. And it's not at all helpful, except for thinking about the details of capital infrastructure. I rode my bike on every bit of every road of Belmont in 2023. Just to look at them all, because I kept hearing about 5 streets, but the reality is that most of the streets that are bad are the through roads that trucks use, and then the private roads on Belmont Hill are the worst roads in town for a bike. Sorry.
You're teaching Belmontonians about balance, is what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah, with bikes. Yeah.
I'm sure that there's a link there somewhere. Do
There
you have any changes you would like to see in how the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee operates when a capital project is proposed?
I think we probably need to revisit our prioritization rubric and matrix that we have set up. That's not something that we are like beholden to absolutely follow, but I think it really guides our discussion. And so far, every year, what it does is it takes everyone individually ranks each project that we have, at least for the upcoming fiscal year, but sometimes for the future few years that we projected out. On a bunch of different measures in this rubric, like I mentioned. And then the spreadsheet amalgamates, what is that? No, not amalgamates, aggregates them into a single score and makes a priority list of things. And then we kind of look at where is the funding cutoff. And there's often a lot of discussion around the bottom 8 projects above the cutoff, maybe a couple of the ones below to try to figure out how can we get something switched around. But I think that sort of a technical side, that process works pretty well. What I think we need to do is go back and look at what comes out in the comprehensive plan and the things in our rubric, like the measures that we're actually doing and their weights, to see how well are we aligning with the priorities that are identified in the comprehensive plan process. So I think it's hard for us. We're like, well, town priorities, right? And the same is true. I also serve as the chair of the Community Preservation Committee, which is sort of an interesting complementary role where I kind of know what's going on in both. And actually, I think if I weren't reappointed to the Capital Budget Committee, I think it would be super smart to have a liaison in the future, whenever I'm not doing those things, to have someone serve on both of those committees in order to sort of know what's going on, because it's a lot of back and forth between who's going to be able to fund what, and like rather than wait for another meeting in the Capital Budget Committee meeting, like to find out, like I just answer the question like, oh, is this eligible? And I'm like, definitely not, or maybe, right? And that makes things go a lot quicker. But so I think sorry to circle back to my answer, I think circling back and looking at the things in our rubric and how we weight them that we use to guide our decisions would be great. Sort of I think we all need to sort of consume and process the different parts of the comprehensive plan that relate to capital investment and infrastructure to try to figure out how they are working. That answers your question. I don't know what else. Some of the projections are really hard. I think Larry Link, who's been on the committee for the same amount of years as me, and I agree, like there's a lot of magic numbers out there. Like a fire truck gets replaced every 10 years in primary service, then 10 more years in secondary service. Like 10 years feels like pretty convenient, right? And it feels like there's probably some way to get an actual number of when it flips over from being too expensive to keep maintaining it. And not just like what the monopolistic manufacturer of fire trucks in the United States says it's 10 years, right? Okay, so there's a lot of things like that where like the replacement cycle happens to be an order of 5 years or 10 years, and I get suspicious of those things. So I know Larry was going to try to dig into a little bit more of that like fleet management stuff this summer. I know back on the structural change impact group, Norma Maserati had some good ideas around that, but I think she sort of stepped back from her participation in town things. And that's kind of, I mean, I think that's it. I feel like we function pretty well. We like more money. Is that one of the things that we can do? It's hard because there's this balancing act, of course, between all the different parts of town. So I think more money would always be good for capital because when you put money into something now, it saves you money later almost every time. So.
Okay, so I think I just answered my next question, which is what do you see as the town's biggest capital challenge and how can the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee help address it?
I mean, I think the biggest question mark is when we did the building assessment a couple years ago. I guess one thing I'd like to change is I would like the members of the committee to have a little bit more direct access to the sort of end of that report. It's been a little bit shielded from us, so we're kind of getting, when we get requests out of it, that's kind of when we find out what's in there. But we did get a summary, and when I look at like what it says about Burbank, parts of Butler and Winbrook, which are sort of older assets, and then looking ahead to the things we're going to need to do to take care of the newer buildings, like we're still in a big hole. And so I worry about those buildings in particular. Burbank, I think, is like $7 to $9 million of sort of semi-immediate needs and then that's just the one that we've heard about, is how I feel, right? And then I'm very concerned about the DPW yard and where that fits into the broader town plans. If it requires a debt exclusion versus, and timing that with an override and maybe where the sort of like whenever the payoff date ends up being for our pension obligations and what the state says about OPEB, and there's a lot of things to fit together in there. So, and I guess the incinerator site makes me nervous, but so that's a long all those things. What can we do? We can try to prioritize it and sort of plan ahead, which I think we've been doing, especially with Jennifer's help and more recently with Donna's help. We've done a good job of sort of squirreling away money, thinking about big projects like the Chenery roof. And so now that that's kind of figured out-ish, depending on what question marks emerge in the final pricing of the PVC top or whatever that is called, the overlayment. When they're done with the project, I'm pointing over there. I live across the street from Chenery. When they're done with the overlayment, that will be out of the way for 25 years, which is great. And so I don't know. It's hard to, like I said, more money. That's what we could do.
How would you describe your methods of working, communicating, and dealing with conflicts in a group or committee setting?
I mean, you've heard me say probably a lot. I love having a repeatable process where we sort of put everything through the same meat grinder and then see how everything comes out. And I feel like that way we avoid me saying what I like or don't like personally, right? I might have a different opinion about how much it impacts health and safety or how aligned it is with town priorities than another member. But since we all go through that process and have some degree of internal validity, right? Between, if I rank something that's high health and safety, it might be because of some particular consideration I have, but across 9 members, that gets kind of taken out in the wash. And then, so I really like that kind of process. Like I felt like for the structural change impact group, we faced a real risk of like being like, I don't like that idea. And that was kind of that would be our answer. I felt like that wouldn't be a satisfying answer to someone who submitted it, right? So we had to say, we don't like that idea because it doesn't do this. This is a complication. The the implementation timeline and costs are high and the savings would be low, right? So like I love designing and implementing processes like that to make it easier for us to avoid it being like a personal discussion about what project is my priority personally, as opposed to like what meets the criteria that we sort of as a group have agreed makes sense. So that's my preference. I'm super straight about communicating. I don't, if I think something's not done right or not being done well, I usually just kind of say it. I don't know, that makes me popular among some people, not everybody. But I feel like I'm people see me as being reasonable. I don't know. Because it's evidence over ideology. How's that? That's the super short answer. Evidence over ideology. I prefer to like gather data and understand and make a decision. Try to leave myself out of it, except in as much as I'm like a resident like anyone else. I try to think about what another person in town might feel about something who's not me. So I don't know.
How do you think the Comprehensive Capital Budget Committee can best communicate with and advise the town in the short and long term?
I mean, I heard some of Jamie's answer and it sounds kind of the same. Like we produced this report and it's long and it's technical. So I think we've been working on creating a little bit better summary. Like I think we went from like executive summary to like full scale everything are the two options. And we're trying to make the executive summary maybe a little bit more of a middle road between, oh, I just want to understand what's in here and like the whole thing, right? All our criteria, all the things we thought about, the projects that are coming up, the things that's hard for people, even town meeting members who are pretty engaged. There's a lot to process for town meeting. So I think that the League of Women Voters Nights are really helpful to think about what's going on this year. I think our multi-year view going up to 30 years is helpful for people to not feel surprised in town meeting. I don't, if I were basing it on how many people attend our meetings as guests, I would say there's not a lot of like general population interest in the capital budget until it's their road. Like people love to discuss whether their road is on the list, not how did the list get created in any other year. And so I don't know that, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that. I think we can improve our report structure to make it easier to consume. And that's something that I know Chris works on a lot. At the same time as that, I'm also working on the report for the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee. So it was harder for me to contribute to that than this year. In the past, I had a little more bandwidth for that. But this year, because I was doing both of those things and we had the special town meeting in March, like everything, maybe you remember, got a little bit jammed up in the spring. And so there was just like less time to do everything, especially trying to coordinate with the warrant committee around and, all the different people trying to fit into everywhere to get to talk to everyone about the CPC stuff. But I didn't have, even last year when I was the chair of CPC, when there was more time between ahead of annual town meeting, I was able to contribute more to the report. And maybe I appreciate these questions. It makes me think like maybe we should try to make that report a little more approachable to the part beyond the executive summary could still be a little more approachable. I don't know. I'll have to think about
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
that. No, I mean, I think you've heard how I feel. I think it's really, really important to make sure we continue to invest in our capital infrastructure. I think Proposition 2.5 led a lot of communities, including ours, to sort of put off a lot of stuff in the 90s when state aid kind of dried up and to avoid doing overrides. And so, we're sort of digging out of that hole a little bit still. So I think we did some of our big buildings and everyone is like, oh, the rink and the library and the police station are done. They like kind of brush their hands off, but in the pool, they see these amazing things happening and they're big. And the high school, sorry, I should have probably mentioned the 7 and 12 school, but there's all these like, the mortar has to get redone probably every year a little bit somewhere, right? And so I think it's a little bit of a behind the scenes thing that not a lot of people think about, but I think that a stitch in time saves 9. And that's why I'm obviously invested in capital infrastructure because of the 2 committees that I serve on, or 2 of the committees I serve on. So I think I've been a valuable contributor so far, and I hope that I can continue to serve on the committee and then do some improvements to our processes as the more sort of more visibility into what actually is a town priority besides just sort of what we think or what we thought when someone wrote a document in 2009, right? Great. I don't know if I have any questions. No, that's it.
Well, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate you coming
Yeah.
tonight.
And thanks again for the flexibility. I appreciate it. I'm glad
I,
that
I understand. I appreciate you coming and participating. Thank
Great.
you.
All right. Yeah, thanks for doing it. All right. Good night.
So next up, we're going to give John Perala, see if we can get the technology working this time. I will promote you to panelist. John is a candidate for the Permanent Building Advisory Committee and the Bylaw Review Committee, so we will ask a bit about both. As he's connecting.
Okay, now can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you this time, but I
Oh,
guess that's, if I got to take one up there, I can see you. And can you speak?
okay. I can see myself. Yeah, that was my
Excellent.
fault.
I can see.
I had selected the wrong microphone when I joined. And you're
We've
right.
all
The
done
only
it.
way to release, the only way to correct that is to rejoin. So
No. Well, all right. Happy to have you. Thank you for coming.
yeah, thank you.
So, can you please provide some background, your education, work, and volunteer experience, which you believe would help with the Permanent Building Advisory Committee and/or the Bylaw Review Committee, including financial, legal, construction, management, and other such skills?
So my educational background, I have a bachelor's science degree. I had a double major, political science and also public administration and policy analysis with a minor in chemistry. But I've worked my entire career in the private industry in engineering construction. In 2009, I got my law degree from John Marshall Law School in Chicago, and I still maintain my license in Illinois. I worked for 7 years in Japan. I taught English for a little bit, and then I worked in the EPC industry, oil and gas. I was involved in the first two LNG plants that they built in Qatar from the office in Japan. Came back to the States in 1999. I worked in Houston for a couple of years. Then we moved to Chicago, where I worked for Sargent Lundy, which is mainly an engineering firm. I worked in procurement and expediting for them, also contract management. And then in January of 2017, we moved to Belmont, and we've lived here since then. I worked for National Grid for 6 or 7 years. And then in 2004, I started working for Hitachi Energy. Their office is based in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I've been working remote. So saves a lot of time with commuting, so I have a little bit of free time. As far as volunteer work, the only thing I've really done is work-related opportunities where National Grid was especially my group I was in. We would do certain things for 4 or 5 times a year, so I was involved in that. None of them in Belmont. These were in upstate New York and different places. So. Yeah, I was pleased to get a letter regarding the committee, learning that they needed members. And, to be honest, I hadn't really thought about it before that. But I think especially the Permanent Building Advisory Committee, I have a lot of professional experience dealing with projects, the bid process, vendor selection, change management, contract administration, contract closeout, safety, different things like that, which could be useful. By law, in the course of work, you have to read so many codes, different, depending where the project is. There's municipal codes, there's state codes, there's state statutes, there's all kinds of things that, and I know the difficulty when things are poorly written, difficulty that it could cause. So, and I think I can have kind of a dry, way to look at things. I hate to bring this up, it's so long ago, but I did have one experience in law school where we were given a section of the Illinois Code, and it was this paragraph was horrible. It was very hard to make sense of. It had something to do with sidewalks. I can't remember. It was a long time ago, but we had to rewrite it, and I actually got called out for being did a very good job on it. But again, I hate to say that it's so long ago, but so I can kind of understand what it would be. So I think that could probably help out in that sense.
I think you kind of answered my second question, which was what makes you want to serve on the Permanent Building Advisory Committee. But I guess let me ask you, what would make you want to serve on the Bylaw Review Committee if that were the choice?
It's something I've done. I've rewritten procedures for companies. I've written procedures from scratch. For example, at National Grid in our standard contract, it was basically one sentence that dealt with dispute resolution, but it really wasn't fleshed out what exactly happened. So I wrote a procedure around that based on the contract, which they adopted, which I enjoyed doing. And I don't know, I suppose it's a thankless task in a way, but I think it's necessary definitely to have people look at those, and especially as new bylaws are written, to make sure that they fit in. One thing you see a lot in my industry, when you have a new project, no one writes a contract from scratch. They pull a contract from a previous project or parts of different projects, and they put it together. And sometimes you read it, and the parties' names will change halfway through, from customer and owner to buyer and seller, or different ways. So, it's just to maintain continuity through those. Sometimes you'll see defined terms that never appear in the document anywhere. They're in the list of definitions, but they never appear. So there's just a lot of things that happens when you're reusing different forms and different contracts. So.
As an attorney who's read a lot of documents, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
What do you see as the town's biggest construction challenges, and how do you think the Permanent Building Advisory Committee could help address them?
I really can't answer that. I really don't know enough about the current situation. My experience with the public buildings has been, my son's school. He's been in Wellington, Butler, Chenery, the new high school, the old high school. But that's about it, really.
How would you describe your methods of working, communicating, and dealing with conflicts in a group or committee setting?
I feel fortunate. We don't have a lot of, I haven't experienced a lot of conflict lately. The people I work with are all professional, and people tend to be reasonable. And I think that's probably the main thing. Not to get emotional, to really, if you strongly have a viewpoint, to back it up with facts and what you can. And you have to realize there are different, especially on a large project, there are different roles have different kind of, they have a little different outlook and different roles, really. For example, as a contract manager, I can give the project manager advice saying, this is what we're entitled to under the contract. This is what the contract says. He has to deal with the client and maintain good business relationships. So even though we're entitled to something under the contract, pushing for it might cause our relationship with the client to suffer. So, people have different outlooks and different responsibilities. So you really have to collaborate as a team and understand where others are coming from. And I would say the main thing is just to try to be calm, have a little humility.
How do you think that the committees, Permanent Building Advisory or Bylaw Review or any committee, could best communicate with and advise the town in the short and long term?
Well, I'm not that familiar. I'm not familiar at all with how it works, but I guess openness is very important. I think the members of committees themselves should be, good citizens, be responsible toward the community. Again, it's hard to answer without knowing more, and it's really experiencing the job of the committee.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about any of this?
No, not at the moment.
Oh, great. I want to thank you for coming, John. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right.
Lastly, this evening, we have Mark Carthy, who is a applicant for the warrant committee. I will promote you to panelist.
Hey, Adam, can you see and hear me?
I can now. Good evening.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
So, can you please provide some background on your education, work, and volunteer experience, which you believe would help the warrant committee, including financial skills you have?
As far as education is concerned, I'm a trained chemical engineer. I've worked in semiconductor manufacturing, and then also have an MBA in finance, and have also worked in financial industry. My work in finance has been in investment banking and venture capital, and mostly in the healthcare area. As far as volunteer work, I have served in town meeting probably for about more than 20 years now. I have been until recently chairman of the Cable TV Advisory Committee. I was also an elected library trustee for some time, probably 15 years. And just lastly, as one of my other volunteer work is I'm qualified to say Catholic Mass in the absence of a priest. So just a little bit of tidbit that people might not know. As far as experience in financials, I have probably 40 years of financial analysis, testing new ideas, and frankly, making the books balance. That's a difficult thing to do in the public sphere, but at least one can try.
What do you see as the town's biggest fiscal challenges, and how can the warrant committee help address them?
Well, I think one of the fiscal challenges really the balancing of the school budget, the town services, and deferred maintenance. And it's not so much whether too much money goes to any one of those, but it's more, is there a fair process and an open process that people understand, so that when they see that maybe more money went to the school, that they understand why that happened. And then the warrant committee can provide reliable numbers that show the impact of decisions that were made on how maybe that money was allocated to the particular bucket. I call them buckets of the school, the town, and deferred maintenance. And then maybe benchmarking that versus other towns in saying that, many towns of similar size do it in a similar manner, and that we're not out of line in the decisions and impact those have in Belmont.
How would you describe your methods of working and communicating in a group or committee setting?
Well, I think one of the things, and again, it goes back to the diversity of, why we live in Belmont, is listening to diverse opinions, looking at the data those people have come up with, and then being able to make a decision as a group, coalescing around maybe some decisions that might not be the first one that you would have come to on your own, but after listening to others and their opinions, being able to kind of add your diversity, but coalesce around a decision that the group is making. So again, it's working, communicating, and looking at the data and listening to other people's opinions.
How would you go about making unpopular decisions and dealing with conflicts?
Well, the first thing, the reason why we all serve, is probably to continue to make Belmont better, leave it in a slightly better place than when you started with it. So continuously making that Belmont better for the long run. If you start with that as a goal, I think nearly everybody on joining a committee wanting to put their time into it has that goal. I think the difficulties get in how to make the nearer term decisions on trade-offs between certain things. For example, maybe it's school versus town. But again, keeping your eye on the long run and making sure Belmont has high quality schools, high quality services, but maybe making some short-term difficult decisions where you trade off one against the other. I think that can happen and still chase after the long run being very good for Belmont.
And how do you think the warrant committee can best communicate with and advise the town in the short and long term?
Well, I mean, the warrant, having sat in town meeting for quite a long time, I really listen to what the warrant committee has to say because they have people who've gone on there, they've looked at a lot of data, and they produce kind of a unbiased recommendation. I also judiciously listen to their votes, and often it's 14-0, but sometimes it's like 8-6, and you want to know if it's 8-6, what happened. So I think it's very important to listen to what the warrant committee has to say. Reading their report, I heard people say that the report is quite long. I mean, you can certainly read some sections of it. They're only a couple of pages. And I think that, warrant committee is very good at producing data that people can read, that give good, balanced data on the decision where town meeting needs to vote on something. So I really respect the data they produce and the reports they produce.
Is there anything else you want to add, Mark?
Well, one of the things I do want to add is that having sat on the library trustee board, sometimes, so you're sitting on the other side from where the warrant committee produces a report and you're reading the report about the work that you're doing for some part of town. Sometimes the warrant committee can get it a little bit wrong. And I think that improving communication between the warrant committee and the various departments of town is quite important because people trust the warrant committee. And I think improving the communication they have to produce those reports is quite important. I won't say wrong is probably a little bit over the top, but it's more that they miss some of the nuances of the working group inside the library, for example. There are particular instances where that's happened. And I think improving communication so their reports are even more accurate would be helpful.
Is there anything else?
That's it. Thank you very much for staying and listening.
No, great. Thank you for coming, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. Bye now.
Bye. So I want to thank everybody for coming. Those are the interviews for tonight. I want to thank everyone for spending my birthday with me this evening. So that was fun. We will be back at it on August 17th, which is Monday night, 7 o'clock. There is a Zoom link for that meeting posted currently on the town website. And we will be taking up 7 applicants at that time, all of whom for the warrant committee. So that should be a good night. And then again, the final interview, there's one person on August 19th at 7 o'clock, which will be right before the start of the Moderator Advisory Council meeting. So the link for the August 19th Moderator Advisory Council meeting would be the link for that one. And that's an interview for the Bylaw Review Committee. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming. As I said, this meeting is being recorded. So it will be, and the recording will be posted soon. So if you know of people who were not able to make it tonight, or if you missed part of it and want to watch it later, or if you just want to watch it again from start to finish, it will be posted so you can do that. So thank you, everybody, and good night.